Okay, everybody. We're still getting a lot of people to join, but we're going to get started just to make sure that we get everyone, we get through all the content that we're trying to get through in the timely fashion. So hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Breaking Barriers, U.S.-Mexico Trade in Shifting Landscape. I'm Christopher Schafer, the president of ImportGenius, and I'm going to be your moderator for today's session. We're kicking off at a time of significant change in this trade environment. On February 1st, President Trump signed an executive order imposing 25% tariffs on products from Mexico. On Monday, he stated they're going to go forward when a month-long delay of their implementation expires next week, with reciprocal tariffs going into effect on April 2nd. This news highlights the volatility and uncertainty we're facing. Even though the tariffs are on hold for now, the underlying tensions remain, and businesses must be ready for any potential future change. Our discussion today is about understanding these shifts, not just as headlines, but as real factors that affect your supply chains, logistics, and strategic planning. We're going to explore how data-driven insights from Mexico border trade is going to help you navigate these challenges, mitigate risks, and seize new opportunities in the world's busiest trade corridor. In terms of how this webinar is going to flow, we're going to start off with a panel discussion, and then we're going to leave time for everyone's questions at the end. So, or whatever questions we can get through. So please get those into the chat, and we're going to address as many as we can as we wrap up. Before we get started, I want to extend Lori Ann's sincere apology for not being able to be here. Most people probably saw the updates, but as a senior reporter at CNNBC covering this topic right now, she was pulled into some urgent story, and we're hoping to have her on one of our next tariff webinars here in the next coming months. So we're going to hopefully get her back on. That being said, we have got an incredible panel today. Okay. Experts that have been covering these issues and advising business on how to adapt today and now. So they're going to share their perspectives, actionable strategies, and how to stay ahead of this ever-changing landscape. With that being said, I'd like to invite both William and Alejandro to introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started. So Alejandro, I'll get you to start, please.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this very timely webinar about what's going on in terms of the U.S.-Mexico relationship. Well, my name is Alejandro Ramos. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce. I am based in New York. The U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, it's a non-profit, non-governmental organization. It's been in existence for more than 100 years. It has its origins here in New York with the Mexican Chamber of Commerce in the United States. And later on, it merged with the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce to become the Northeast chapter. Our mission is to promote and facilitate business between Mexico and the U.S., inbound, outbound, from traditional trade, but also we cover areas of financial services, professional services, etc. And well, again, very, very glad to be here.
I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you very much. William, please go ahead.
Hey there. Thanks for having me today. So my name is William George. I'm head of research here at ImportGenius, and I've been with the company since 2018, which is a relevant date here because that was the beginning of the first Trump trade war, the Section 301 tariffs. So it's fascinating to be here for round two and take the insights that I've developed over the past 6 years and honed and share them with you today.
Excellent. Well, thank you. With that being said, everybody, let's jump right into this. We have a limited amount of time, and I'd love to get started on this. So, William, let's just stay with you, and I want to kick off with, you contributed to the CNNBC article, the one that was how Trump's tariffs on Mexico and Canada will sweep across. I'm just going to review my notes across the U.S. state by state. And that was just Tuesday, right? So can you expand on what this means? I think it couldn't be more relevant than right now. So please give us some perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So obviously this is a rapidly developing story, but For that article, we worked with CNBC and LendingTree to analyze US imports from Canada, China, and Mexico on a state-by-state basis at the 6-digit HS code level. I really recommend that people take a look at that article. It's got detailed stats if you want those, written by Lorianne, who unfortunately can't be here today, but is one of the best reporters on the topic. But let me give you the main takeaways. So unsurprisingly, oil, auto, and technology, those sectors, they dominate by dollar values. And we know that. And we know that if these tariffs on Mexico and Canada, not the initial Chinese tariffs, which are already in play and maybe about to double, if these go live, there will be pain. But the thing to focus on here is that these are our top 3 trading partners, right? So it isn't just about the big industries. There's going to be price increases from everything from strawberries to medical instruments. So every grocery store shelf, every used car dealership, even your health insurance premiums, those might all start to rise. And you'd be pretty hard pressed to find any company involved in manufacturing in the US whose supply chains won't be impacted. So for example, there's a company called Burn. They're a Michigan-based electronics manufacturer. And just this week, their VP of sales had to send out an email saying that despite their really hard work to keep their supply chains as domestic as possible, because of the 10% China tariffs, they're having to raise prices 1 to 4% on certain product lines that contain components they couldn't source domestically. So the other side of this too is that it's not just the import value of the goods. Like if we look at Mexico specifically, Michigan receives $50 billion a year in auto parts and cars for their auto industry. And that goes on to support roughly 300 billion of the state's GDP. So these inputs can have really, really large impacts on broader state economies.
It's great perspective. Let's move into the tariffs and trade policy. And Alejandro, let's move over to you. And from your work, what are businesses most concerned about? And what strategies are they using to mitigate risk right now? I think that's the underlying question I have right out of the gates on the tariff piece for you.
Yeah, I think that, well, it basically depends on the profile of the companies because, well, when you talk about trade between Mexico and the US, it could be in many ways. In some cases, it's just final products. If you are talking about the products in the agribusiness industry, well, you're going to be importing strawberries or blueberries or avocados. At the same time, you have the other side of the equation, U.S. companies exporting to Mexico corn and other soybeans and other products. In those cases, it's, I would say, relatively simple to understand the potential immediate effect of a tariff. And there is not much to do in the short term, but basically to look for price, for pricing in other countries and in other latitudes and considering transport, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, the strategy, just as William was mentioning, could be just to increase prices. There is not much to do in the very short term. But in the other side of the spectrum, you have a lot of companies that produce together between Mexico, the US, and even Canada. Of course, well, the most clear example is the auto industry, in which, well, you may be importing from Mexico a car or a truck, but before that, there were a lot of pieces, a lot of parts that were crossing the border, both sides. It could be brakes from Mexico coming to the US, part of the computers of the car from the US to Mexico. So on average, it's the parts of an automobile cross the border 8 times at least. So for a company like that to see these tariffs or how to react, it's very complex. It is not that you can just unwind the whole supply chain and then have a manufacturing of the whole thing in the US or coming from other countries. That is something that takes a lot of time. So in a lot of cases, what's the strategy? Well, you have to think medium and long term to really explore what's going to be the outlook in the long term of these tariffs, if they are going to be permanent, if they are going to be just temporary, and depending on that is the reaction that the company may have. in other cases, the strategy for companies, let's say that they are planning to invest in plants in Mexico or something like that, is wait and see. Because again, we don't know if it's going to be something permanent or temporary. So companies, they are just waiting to see what is going to happen, and then they will be making their investment decisions about establishing
Yeah.
a plant in Mexico. So all in all, it's with all the uncertainty that you see, there are not solutions in the very short term that the companies can do. I've been hearing the cases of companies in the electronic industry that one day before the first potential date of the tariffs, what was going to happen a month ago, they basically in one day look for to lease as a warehouse space in Texas, and they exported all the production that they already had in Mexico to the US just to be safe and to try to avoid the tariffs. But
Wow.
that avoidance is going to be for 1 or 2 days. It's not going to be a long-term solution.
No, makes sense. Highly reactive. No, it's can, just staying with this. Can we stay? Let's put this in context. How the U.S. trade relationship compares to the U.S.'s other major, relationships or countries as far as trade goes. Like, let's just put it in context so everybody understands.
Well, you should analyze this from different perspectives. One is what is the long-term goal of the U.S. If that goal is reduce deficit, reduce the dependence on, in this case, for example, China, because all the imports that you are having from them, especially in certain areas that imply some national security issues, well, the possibility of working with your allies, it's significant. So that's why the relationship between Mexico and the U.S. and Canada is really important for the U.S. If the region wants to be really competitive and really support this disengagement of from Chinese products, from Chinese supply chains, well, you have to work locally. And guess what? Mexico and the U.S. are neighbors, and none of them are planning to move. So here we are to stay. So it would be better. And companies have been doing this for not just since the beginning of NAFTA, but for so many years. Is working together to take advantage of the competitive advantages of each country and build together North American products.
Yeah. Great points, William. You mentioned you started your trade research with in 2018, right? So, how did trade data help you drive actionable insights as you worked on reports? And what do you see the same big thing being possible in this next round, like as far as trade analysis goes?
Yeah, so that was a wild time to start doing this work. And honestly, the only wilder time since has been right now. So our research team put together an in-depth analysis of front-loading activity. Front-loading being when retailers or anybody, they bring in large amounts of goods and warehouse them so that they can get them into the country before tariffs hit and then buy themselves some financial runway to sort of deal with the problem later. So yeah, we were looking at front-loading activity by major retailers, and we were able to see how Walmart, Target, Amazon, et cetera, how their behavior and their import volumes correlated to rumors, deadlines, and tariff impositions. With US import records updating daily and Mexican records updating monthly, if you know the signals you're looking at, you can basically spot this happening in real time. And this is super valuable if you're one of the suppliers for these people, you're trying to forecast their demand. Maybe you're in logistics and you're interested in handling shipments for companies that may be engaging in front loading. And especially as we have further rounds of tariffs, we could see additional front loading activity. Or maybe you're an investor and you're trying to use shipping activity to predict sales estimates ahead of earnings calls. So we're absolutely already seeing visible signals of behavior like this right now. So two smaller companies whose imports really popped in the lead up to the China tariff impositions were Columbia Sportswear and Yeti. And you can see this happening in the solar and in the data center industries as well. Now, another kind of activity that this data allows you to model clearly is where major companies are shifting their manufacturing to. So nearshoring is clear. That's especially visible in the Mexico data. But you can also see how Vietnam and Thailand have been major winners in the push to divest from China. And if you're a manufacturer interested in doing this, this data is a great way to identify potential factory partners and operators, and also keep a sense of where your competitors' supply chains are moving to. So yeah, absolutely.
Great
This
points.
is just as doable now as it was last time.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. Over to you again. So Mexican average tariffs on U.S. goods is 7%, while under the USMCA. So most goods are exempt from tariffs. With new tariffs coming into play, how is this going to impact this, or is it going to impact it?
Well, first of all, that 7% could be according to WTO, but in practice, the tariff is zero because you are within the USMCA. So basically, I would say all the products are exempt from tariffs. If the USMCA goes away, then you will have to manage that other tariffs that are according to the WTO. But we don't see that as a short-term scenario.
Excellent.
Then which products are or industries are going to be more impacted with this potential 25% tariff? Of course, those that are the most important proportion of exports from Mexico to the U.S. You have to, of course, consider the automotive industry. I think that would be the number one. But also some manufacturing products. Well, it was already mentioned, medical devices. Mexico is a significant exporter of medical devices to the U.S. But also products in the agribusiness sector. That well, the U.S. imports several of them from Mexico. But again, that an impact of something like that is going to be in the short term because well, some weeks later, you will see these reciprocal tariffs imposed to other countries. And if, for example, you have the option of importing some agricultural products from Mexico or from Costa Rica, well, probably you will be facing similar tariffs from both countries. I couldn't be really concerned about this 25% in general for all Mexican products. Because that is responding more to, I would say, to other areas related to security, migration, etc., etc. So the real concern should be on those tariffs that may respond to economic issues, and those are the ones that the Department of Commerce here in the U.S. has mentioned that well they are analyzing them and that those are the ones that should be the real concern for companies because in those cases most likely they are going to be just in a specific industry in a specific products and they may have a longer term effect. Something also important to mention is that any tariff is against the USMCA, so that may create significant tensions about the relationship, some potential retaliation from Mexico or from Canada. That is in the medium long term is not going to be good for anybody, and that may even benefit some other countries that are competing with the U.S.
It's great points. You touched on some of the industries that are going to, yeah, if these are fully enforced, some of the industries that are going to be really impacted. William, I want your opinion on this too, from the data standpoint. But Alejandro, is there any other industries that should really be thinking about this before I get William's opinion on this as well?
Yeah, I think that the easiest way to check about these industries is precisely analyzing the data that William is going to be discussing, because it's very easy to see, well, what are the products, the industries that may have a more significant impact. But it could be I don't know, big appliances. Mexico export dryers, washers to the US, and they are not products that can be easily substituted for products coming from Asia because just the shipping, the logistics it's quite expensive, and even the TVs. TVs. Mexico export a lot of TVs to the US. Mexico is one
Of
of the
course.
largest producers of TVs. Same thing. It could be really difficult to substitute them from products from other regions. And yes, well, they are going to be certainly impacted by if these tariffs go in for
Excellent. Thank you. William, can you jump on that as well, please?
Yes, we've talked about the major categories here, but auto and things like that. But something I really think we should keep an eye out for is that we bring in about $100 billion a year in crude from Canada and another 12 or so from Mexico. So a 25% tariff on that, while it will, contribute a lot in taxes to the US, that's going to come at the cost of increasing people's prices at the pump. And not just, individual consumers, but that's going to drive logistics prices up because even a small fluctuation in gas prices for trucking, for air freight, that can have significant impacts on company budgets. And these can really stretch these budgets uncomfortably if people don't have scenarios planned which might account for that. And logistics costs in general are likely to go up as well if these recent proposed fees for ocean freight carriers that operate Chinese vessels as part of their fleets are implemented. We've seen how significant spot rates and logistics costs can be as an inflationary driver. And we do know that these price increases inevitably get passed on to the consumer.
It's great points. Let's move into supply chain and logistic impacts right now. If we just stay on that. So Alejandro, do you foresee a problem with demand happening as a result of this at all right now?
I think that well, the challenges will come both sides, from the supply side and the demand side. Again, there are products that are going to be difficult to basically stop importing them and then produce them here in the US. So the impact in terms of logistic services is not necessarily going to change because of changes in demand. It is going to definitely depend on the adjustment and what happens with in terms of the relation of the U.S. with other countries regarding tariffs, because again, in the short term, you cannot substitute immediately those products. You will keep importing. But if companies start seeing this as a long-term situation, then of course you will start seeing more potential evaluation about investment plans here in the U.S. as opposed as in Mexico or any other areas. But that is something that is gonna take time. Something that is also important to consider is what is gonna be the effect on the FX rate, because you may say, okay, well, let's have a general tariff of 10% of Mexican products, just to say something, because I don't think that it's going to be all across. If the peso loses value in 10%, at the end of the day, the price is going to be more or less the same. If you have the opportunity to buy cheaper in another country, well, you may look at that. But if, again, you have also these tariffs with other countries, then the price is going to be the one driving the decision making, and it may be not significant shifts on where to buy. The important thing is in those cases is the impact on the consumers, because at the end of the day, it is not the companies, the ones that are going to be absorbing the whole effect of a tariff, but the price is going to be passed to consumers. Then you will see if it's a staple product, well, there is going to be inflation, but the demand will continue. But if you are looking at some products that not in the basic consumption that a family, a household has in the US. If it's a TV, well, they can wait 2 more years to change the TV. They can change 3 more years to change the washing machine, or they can repair the one that they have. So that is going to change the consumption. There may be some impact in the demand, and of course, well, that will affect the potential demand of the logistics services.
I have a fun little example to riff
Please
on
jump
here, which
Yeah, please
is
jump in.
I was digging into our Mexico shipments to Montana, and I noticed 2 shipments of luxury cars. There's a Ferrari and a Lamborghini, both with a declared value of around $1 million. And if all of a sudden you have to pay an additional 25% tariff on that, you're going to source your Ferrari or Lamborghini somewhere else. That's the kind of trade that's just going to vanish.
Is there anything else, anything else as far as analyzing the trade data that you want to jump in on that as well? William, any other fun stories that you can tell us?
Oh man, I mean,
I'm
you can
more
see
interested
all
in what
kinds of
role.
things.
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, you can basically see all kinds of things flowing into the U.S. from Mexico, and it really runs the gamut. And you could do this on a state-by-state basis, as the article that Janine shared in the chat shows. And there's such a major trading partner of ours that basically any imaginable good, someone is sourcing it. Maybe you're in New Hampshire and you don't realize that the green coffee beans that you're picking up for your coffee roasting, they're coming from Mexico. All kinds of little stories like that.
Yeah. So some real world examples of how companies are leveraging trade data to mitigate risk and like find new opportunities right now is I'd love to hear some stories around leveraging trade data for competitive advantage if possible.
Yeah, totally. So we see this every day in sectors that deal with export control, like microchips or aircraft parts. All of them have significant compliance requirements that demand close monitoring of their supply chains. And our data allows them to do that. But let's look at this current situation here. So imagine you're a US dairy exporter and you realize that 40% of your dairy exports are going to Mexico and Canada, 40% of all US dairy exports. And they may even be facing retaliatory tariffs. So if you have to start exploring other markets, but you don't necessarily know who major buyers in those countries are, this is a great place to start with detailed trade data. And it's super easy to do. So you just start looking at import records from those countries, the countries you're considering. And you can type in your HS codes, your relevant HS codes, and immediately you get names, addresses, and also a sense of which specific types of products those companies are buying, like, not just dairy as a general category, but are there types of cheese that are in demand, things like that. And critically, you also get the declared market value of their imports, so you can understand what the competition really looks like, not at the consumer level, but at the actual declared value level. But to build off that more generally, this data has been tremendously useful for companies finding new clients, especially in logistics. So Flexport, for example, while using our data, has been able to find new clients daily in the data set. And this is the case for people in logistics broadly, but as well as in manufacturing, to try to find, factories that you want to source with, or to try to find new contracts for a factory you may be operating.
It's great. Just great examples for companies currently not using trade data. What's the ABCs of how do you start? Like you kind of went through some of the use cases of what you would look at, but if this is new to you, trade data's it can be complex if you're not looking at it effectively. So what's the ABCs to this of letting if somebody's just going to get started on it, looking at it, what they should be doing?
Yeah, Chris. So it can seem pretty complicated if you haven't worked with these records before, but you would be, I think, surprised by how straightforward and immediately useful the data points can be. So the key data points that you'll need to work with are going to vary for you industry by industry, but in general, you should be focused on the names of the counterparties to a transaction. So the businesses on either side, the HS codes of the goods shipped or the product description, the value of those goods. That's a really good place to start. And each data set we have is different because global customs disclosures aren't entirely standardized. despite our best efforts. So some data sets may have super valuable and exciting fields like container number or marks and numbers or carrier info that others won't contain. But all of them will have consignee names and ways to identify the products in each individual shipment down to the container level that those consignees receive. And but really what I'm trying to say here is there's lots of complicated and exciting stuff that we do, that our clients do with this data, but the barrier to entry here when it comes to getting immediate value out of it is almost zero. If you know the name of a competitor or you have a product category in mind to examine, you can get useful information immediately with really no processing or data science needed.
It's great. It's great. Strategic growth and future outlook. Let's shift a little bit. Thanks, William. That was great. But Alejandro, what regulatory or policy changes should businesses be watching for in the next, I would say week, but even 6 to 12 months, if we were to try to guess that far out, like what should they be watching? Where should they be looking?
I think that probably the most important matter at this time is the future of the USMCA. And it is important to understand what is going to happen in the next months and particularly next year, because most of the media, all the headlines say, well, next year it may be the death of the USMCA if we have this trade war, potential trade war between or Mexico, the US, Canada, etc. First of all, if it is important to understand again what is going to happen, what is in the agreement. The agreement doesn't say that it's gonna it can be finished in 2026. In 2026 is an opportunity for the three countries to do a review of the agreement. So each country will have the possibility of saying, okay, I think that the agreement is not working because of this, on that, and probably we should work on the changing something. It is not an open, full renegotiation of the agreement. It could be, but it might not be. It might not be the case. Uh, we should expect changes. Yes, definitely. And the agreement was negotiated precisely to do that, because I don't know. I was hearing from someone a couple of days ago saying, well, when the USMCA was negotiated 6 years ago, AI was not a significant thing, but now AI is all over the place. So because it's all over the place, well, there should be some update in the agreement. There are special areas of concerns, like again the automotive industry, potential changes in rules of origin. Also, also you've been reading a lot in the news that there is an inflow of Chinese investment in Mexico, that they are establishing plants in Mexico, basically to move just some products from China to Mexico and then export them to the US. That is happening in some cases, but it's not something that is happening in a generalized way. So, but there may be some concerns from the US about specific products that may be manufactured in Mexico by Chinese companies, that the US may not feel that comfortable with that. If you are talking, I don't know, it may not be the case, but just semiconductors or something like that, well, there may be some issues that may be reflected in the USMCA saying, okay, well, in these industries, it should be real North American products.
Produced. Yep. Yep.
So that may change a little bit, but definitely the most important piece of I would say some way regulation that may affect the three countries is the future of the USMCA. We have to keep an eye on that. The revision may start earlier, which it could be fine. There is nothing like that. And again, it is not that next year if they decide, well, not to continue with the agreement, is going to end that. There is a period of 10 years to have the agreement in some way revoked. So there more time for negotiation. There
It's
is more time
great.
for negotiation. You know.
It's great points. I'm just going to pop over there. There's some questions. We've got a bunch of questions that have been popping up. The one what that looks that there's a theme to a few of these that I want to just cover off. But the one that I'm seeing is, and this is looks Alejandro, maybe you can answer this one first. Disruption usually creates opportunity, and I'm just reading through this. But is there some opportunities that we see arising from this uncertainty, reactiveness, disruptions? Are there actually some opportunities for businesses to be able to take advantage? That's a question. Either one of you could maybe take a crack at that, but maybe Alejandro, you want to start with that? That'd be great.
I think that one of the most significant opportunities, and it's something that started actually during the first Trump administration, is this intention to start some decoupling from China. And if this trend continues, well, there are some things that are going to be really difficult to manufacture here in the U.S. And the U.S. will look for allies, for countries that the U.S. can trust. And one of them is definitely Mexico. So that will open opportunities. It is not that I think that some people say, well, Mexico can substitute China. That is not going to happen because, well, you see the size of the economy of Mexico vis-a-vis the one of China, the number of factories that are in Mexico vis-a-vis the number of factories in China. No, it could be some sort of a complement, and it can help, and the opportunity is there. So companies that are thinking about establishing manufacturing facilities in other countries vis-a-vis Mexico, if there is this intention to continue with the coupling of China and potentially other countries from Asia, well, there is a significant opportunity. And there are important complementarities between the two economies, and that just wearing my hat of the U.S.-Mexico Chamber of Commerce, it is not just to benefit Mexico or benefit the U.S. The idea is to benefit both countries, to work together and to have North American products, just as you have the Airbus as a European plane. Well, you have a Learjet that is a North American plane. So it's important to explore the possibilities of working together, and opportunities are going to be for the three countries.
Yeah, and
please, William, jump in there.
Thank you.
This is great.
That was a wonderful response, Alejandro. And what I can speak to about this is really how you can use trade data to identify opportunities and navigate these disruptions more effectively. And what I see the value of trade data being in a situation like this is, just to harp back on this, it provides both real-time updates and a historical perspective. So you can work with this, you can look backwards, you can say, okay, like here's what the 2018 Section 301 tariffs looked like at the container level in terms of impacts on port traffic. And then you can zoom out and you can model how companies shifted their supply chains over the following years. And that is directly applicable to our situation right now. If you're a logistics company, if you're trying to get business from industry impacted by this, you can get a sense of what moves companies are already making now and will continue to make to adapt to this new environment. And that can inform your contract proposals, your sales outreach. Now, let's say you're one of the businesses being disrupted. Well, you can see exactly how your competitors are responding, down to the carriers, the freight forwarders, and their new manufacturers in new countries. And that can also inform your strategies. And let's say that you're in this privileged position of being in this situation of disruption, and you have an idea for an unfilled niche or a newly viable trade lane. Well, you can look at this data and you can see how open that is. Is there space for you to move in? Who else is trying that? What kind of results are they getting? So there are many ways that people at all levels of this can benefit from even a very basic use of this data.
It's great. It's a great answer. So we're getting a number of questions around sourcing. There's a whole bunch of questions around sourcing out there, but people are trying to the first question, I'm just going to call it straight out here, that is the general sentiment between the U.S., Mexico, Canada industries the same, comma, in general, question mark, i.e. are most gearing up for inevitable price increases because viable fast alternatives are not possible? Person has a suspicion, but I don't want to add that. But that's a question. Does anybody else want to answer that? Or should I back that up? Do you want me to hear it again?
I'm happy to hop on
Please jump on
my
there,
initial
William.
perspective. Alejandro, if you want to read the question in full, it's in the chat there. So yeah, what we're really seeing here is a lot of uncertainty with the tariffs. And if you are operating manufacturing in the US or dealing with a complicated supply chain, you have to reckon with the fact that tariffs can be imposed and revoked with the stroke of a pen. The same cannot be said about building out new manufacturing capacity, about signing new logistics contracts. I mean, sure, that's a pen too, but that's many more. Like that's a much larger commitment compared to the sudden whiplash that can occur. And an example of that whiplash really were the threatened tariffs on Colombia back in just a couple weeks ago, when Colombia was refusing to accept deportation flights. And there were a huge number of industries that would have been immediately impacted, but those tariffs were threatened and then dropped within a day. So the question is, even if these tariffs do go through, how long will they remain active? Is there a chance that the pain and concern inflicted on companies, on these industries, will be enough to get the kinds of radical concessions that will satisfy the administration? And if so, will they then be dropped? So perhaps the wait and see, at least in the near term, is the thing to do. And consumers will just sort of have to accept price increases, which may actually be part of the administration strategy.
Alejandro, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was looking at the question about whether you can find reliable sourcing with the same quality, etc. It definitely depends on the industry and the product, because you have also to consider that the manufacturing in China has been, well, it grown a lot since its integration to the World Trade Organization, and a lot of companies bet completely on the Chinese manufacturing. And at the same time, well, in Mexico, there were some industries that started to lag in terms of that development, because the demand for the products diminishes significantly. So in some cases, Mexico is just catching up with that. There are some industries like auto parts, automotive, even the parts for the aeronautic industry, medical devices, that they've been growing strongly since the inception of NAFTA, and you can find reliable, extremely high quality products in those industries. But there are some others, like I don't know, the toy industry, in which Mexico at some point was very strong. Then Mexico like a little bit, but now you see big companies that you see in all the big retailers, that the same doll or very similar dolls are made in Mexico or in China. So they are really catching up. You see European companies that put together plastic for construction. You may be wondering what's that company, that they have one of the largest manufacturing companies in Mexico. But there are some other toys that well, they stopped to manufacture them in Mexico, I don't know, 20 years ago, and they are coming back. So it is not that you can immediately find a replacement. And the other thing is capacity. So I was mentioning before, well, the supply that you may get for certain products in China, it's well, several times larger than the one in Mexico. So you're gonna be competing with other companies looking for the same product that have a more limited production in Mexico. But in time, just as the automotive industry developed in Mexico, if things are right, they align. You should be able to find the same sort of quality products in Mexico
It's
or
uh
other industries. You know.
it's a great point. I really like the fact that you time stamped it, right? Of when it might not have been that was before, but in the last number of years, a lot of those industries have come back and futures are still coming back and sourcing and checking on those suppliers of who's bringing those, or if you can get them in Mexico now is the answer could be very different than it was 5 years ago. You might find three new suppliers now, right? It's a great point. We're butting up against the hour, so I would love a 1 or 2 minute wrap up from each of you. Alejandro and William, please just one or two key takeaways. We've learned a ton here today, and this has been incredible. I thank you both. But if there's one or two takeaways, that's it, that people should take away from this. What are they from each of you? If whoever would like to start that, I'd love to hear it.
I can do this really quickly here. So yeah, I'm just going to hit this point a third time. When we look at this trade data and we're trying to navigate this trade war situation that's unfolding, we're in a privileged position because it's not a totally new scenario. We saw this happen in 2018 to a smaller extent. So you take this trade data and you combine the real time and historical perspectives, and that allows you to really understand what signals to look for as you're modeling how things from the micro to the macro level, how individual equities, how larger industry supply chains, how all of that is shifting. You know what signals to look for. And that is the information that you need right now to navigate these really turbulent times with confidence.
That's great. Alejandro?
Yeah, I think that a couple of recommendations. One would be don't look at the U.S.-Mexico trade relationship in isolation. You have to see what is going on around the world. Now that there is the threat of reciprocal tariffs with other countries, that is going to affect whatever happens between Mexico and the US? Because you may see, oh, well, this 10% or whatever tariff in certain product is going to really impact what I'm doing with Mexico. And you start looking at other countries and you see that the reciprocal tariff is going to make it even more expensive or more difficult to bring it from another country. So the story is gonna change. Also, you have to be looking at which not only tariffs, any other trade restriction is responding to business, to economic situations, and those that are responding or are using for other different things, like in order to get some more actions from Mexico in order to combat the fentanyl trafficking or with migration, because those tariffs at the end of the day they may not stay forever because they are looking for specific areas that are not related to economic issues. But if you see some other restrictions that are responding to a specific sectors, industries like the automotive industry, those are the ones that you have to really take into account because they may be there to stay for longer. It is important to distinguish among these different restrictions or barriers, and also look beyond just the price, manufacturing, etc. Because when just one example is what happens in terms of intellectual property protection. For US companies at some point to manufacture in China, well, they were required to do joint ventures with Chinese companies. But part of that joint venture was to share the technology. And well, all in all, you have companies from China doing using that technology, that intellectual property to produce competing products. In the case of Mexico, that doesn't happen because Mexico do not require any joint venture, any sharing of technology. So you may see that in the medium long term for even for the U.S. government, that creates more confidence on working together with countries like Mexico or Canada or other allies. So it's important to see just beyond the tariff, beyond those barriers. That will open important opportunities, and you foresee whether the future of the U.S.-Mexico trade relation is going to be vis-a-vis what happens with other countries.
Excellent. Thank you. With that being said, I think we're up at time, everybody. But I want to thank both my panelists again, Alejandro, William. That was excellent. This is something we're going to be continuing at ImportGenius. You know, we're going on 18 years in this space. We have a ton of tacit knowledge, and we worked with a number of companies navigate this, but we want to continue these educational seminars. So everybody, thank you for attending. We really appreciate it. The theme here we're going to leave is this is going to be a continued turbulent time, right? We're going to hear it. Businesses are reactive. We don't see businesses slowing down from that. They're going to continue to be reactive. If we can help you out at ImportGenius just with the visibility and the dashboard to help you navigate those turbulent times, please use us. But really would love to hear your feedback on the thought leadership today, because personally, I just thought this was a great webinar. So thanks everybody for attending. And with that being said, have a great day, everyone. You're going to receive a recording of this webinar. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.